So if you are an employee, you go ahead and take your seat. All right, so you can see a lot of familiar faces from yesterday, but I do want to share with those who are just joining us today that over here, up to the left, there's a video screen, and you're on video. So this is being live streamed, so just be cognizant that all your actions, moves, and everything is going to be live streamed, so don't do anything embarrassing. This is the employee question and answer session that was established by the board for our employees to be able to ask questions of the candidates. And tonight we have Dr. Bellamy with us. And so I do ask, and the board has asked that if you want to ask questions tonight, that you have your badge displayed, so that way you know that you're an employee. I do want to introduce Elizabeth Vincent over here, our Director of Continuous Improvement, and Jessica Goldberg, our Director of Communications and Marketing, are going to be assisting today. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bellamy here in just a moment to give him an opportunity to share for just a few moments about his personal and professional kind of experience and why he's here today. And then we're going to open up the floor to questions. And so what we'll do, it's going to be as simple as just in the classroom, raise your hand, and we'll come to you with the microphone. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you. Well, you got your little bells.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. And first, thank you all for coming out tonight and giving up your time. I look forward to your questions. Those of you that have worked with me or served in some other capacity, it means the world to me to see your faces. I wouldn't be where I am without each of you. And so I'll start a little bit about myself. I was, you may have heard my interview, born and raised here in Clarksville. I went to school across the river at Cumberland Heights Elementary School and graduated from Montgomery Central High School. Came back to teach here at Sango Elementary School, and then I moved to the north side of town and worked at West Creek Elementary School and Hazelwood Elementary School before taking a job at the district level as the Director of Services for Exceptional Children. So I served as a teacher, as an assistant principal, as a principal, the Director of Services for Exceptional Children, and the principal at Kenwood Middle School for a brief stint, while I was also the Director of Services for Exceptional Children, and then I took on 5 years as the Director of Elementary School. Prior to or after that, rather, I spent about a year as the Director of High Schools. And the pandemic happened in March of 2020, and I was fortunate enough to lead our high schools through the beginning stages of that and up through getting a great deal of students across the line to graduate that year when the pandemic first hit. And then an opportunity presented itself, and I have been in Metro Nashville Public Schools since July of 2020, where I've worked for the last 2 years as their Chief of Academics and Schools. And this job became open and posted long before I ever thought it would. When I left Montgomery County, Mr. House had extended his contract. He encouraged me when the opportunity came out to go better myself, so that when the opportunity to serve came around to my home district, maybe I'd be as prepared as humanly possible. And then he left a little bit quicker than I thought he was going to, so I thought I had a few more years to prepare myself before I'd be here standing in front of you. But nonetheless, here I am, and it's an honor of a lifetime to have served this district and to get the opportunity to speak for this. I realize how fortunate I am. I'm a lucky man in very many aspects, one of which is the district that I've served in for so long and the fact that I still get to help kids in Middle Tennessee. I love what I do, and I look forward to continuing to educate children, and hopefully it's leading you guys. So that's a little bit about me and my journey, where I've been, and I look forward to your questions. So thank you again for coming out tonight. I know everybody's got a lot to do on a Wednesday in May, no less, and then showing up again to teach all day tomorrow. So I greatly appreciate it. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
All right, so here we go. We start off with questions. So.
Hello, Dr. Bellamy. Tammy Mansky from Kenwood Elementary School. My question to you is, each year teachers are asked to complete extra tasks compared to the previous year. This puts more on our plates that you already know that are way too full. As a director of schools, what will you do to ensure that teachers have less tasks and more time to continuously improve for our students?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Mansky. For those of you that don't know, you're the presence of teaching greatness. Tammy Mansky is one of my favorite teachers of all time, and I absolutely adore her. If I can do anything to protect her instructional time, I certainly want to be coaching her to do so. And so I appreciate the question, and I'm sure lots of teachers have that same question on their mind. We seem to continue to add to teachers' plates. And I talked a lot about being a support hub, and a lot about, Dr. Vital has conditioned me to use the term support hub and not central office, because she truly believes that we exist to support our schools. And so I think when we talk about what support means, it's not one more person telling you how to carry the load differently, or cheering you on while you're carrying the load, but it's actually supporting you carrying that load. So I would want to know more about at each individual school what's been put on your plate. I mean, what gets put on a teacher's plate is specific often to the needs of the school, right? Their bell schedule, a variety of things, the staffing, depending on what kind of planning time a teacher can have, what kind of extra staff are in the school. And so I talked a lot about school-based budgeting tonight in my interview. I talked a lot about empowering principals and teachers to make those decisions. And I am fortunate to have served in a district that budgets very differently for the last 2 years. And what I can tell you is that you see site-based decisions made to protect that time. And so the fact is, those decisions will not be mine and mine alone to make. We've got to hear from each of our schools and each of our teachers what's being put on their plate. And then we have to work creatively with our principals to problem solve that and say, what resources would you need to take this off their plate so that they could do and focus more on the things that we hire them to do. And so I hope you don't think I'm trying to cop out of answering your question. I don't have a direct answer to say, this is what I'll do to relieve your bus duty, or this is what I'll do to relieve this or that. I think it's a complex process and needs to be based in each school. How you run a high school in those duties is incredibly different than how you run an elementary school. But what I know is that each of our principals will understand what they're asking of their staff. And when we come, we use a lot of the surveys that I mentioned in my interview. When we find out the things that are truly hampering our staff from getting to do that job and from feeling that's causing them to feel burdened and overworked, we have the people and the resources and the talent and the smarts to fix those problems. And I think we can fix a lot of them without just throwing money at a problem. I think it's empowering site-based decision to make the decision that's best for that school, for that kid, for those teachers in that moment. Ms. Mancy, I appreciate the question. It's so great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Bellamy. I'm Chris Darrell. I'm a teacher at Montgomery Central Middle School, or Montgomery Central High School. I started Kenwood Middle School, I think that's what I was thinking of. Given the current state of public education and the overwhelming climate teachers are currently working within, how would you, as director, convince someone to enter the teaching profession when there are other opportunities with better pay and less stress?
It's a great question, Mr. Gerald. We have a couple of connections. I served at Kenwood Middle as well and graduated from Montgomery Central, so it's okay to confuse the two. Confuse where I'm working on a daily basis. I think it comes down to, again, some of what I said in my interview. If you were I won't say fortunate enough to hear, if you were here and heard that, right? We have to redesign the profession. What attracted me to it, what attracted you to it is not what's going to attract the next generation to it. Teachers don't want to shut their door and work all day by themselves. When I was an elementary teacher, I begged Ursula Story to let me departmentalize because I wanted something different. She empowered me and gave me the choice to do that with another one of our teachers, and we thought that was innovative at the time, right? But we got a colleague I work with now calls it, let's make teaching a team sport. Because I think the generation of teachers coming out now, and even the generation of teachers that exist now, they don't want to teach in isolation. They want to share those experiences. They want to have a collegial atmosphere. They want to team teach. They want to be supported. They want job embedded PD. And so it's not a sales pitch to someone coming out now. It's a sales pitch to what we're going to be in 2 or 3 years. If I'm your director of schools and the teaching job looks the exact same 2 years from now as it does today, then I have failed you and I want you to call me on that. Now, those are incremental changes we'll have to make. We can't absolutely turn that over overnight. And it's going to cost money, it's going to cost thinking, it's going to cost redesigning what we do. It's how Uber disrupted taxis, right? But if we just think, I'm going to shut my door, I'm going to teach from 8 to 3 like I always have, people aren't going to go into this profession, right? I don't know that we have a recruitment problem or a retention problem. I think we have a burdensome professional problem. We've got to redesign it in a way that's going to attract people back to it, and that's going to take time. It's not a silver bullet approach. But I would love to hear from teachers what they want to see change in their job. When we implemented the opportunity culture and we tried those things, it was from talking to teachers and saying, what is it would have prepared you? What is it you need? What is it you wanted? I can't wait to see those folks graduate and see if they're better prepared, how they've enjoyed team teaching, working with an MCL, being on a team with LTE, LTRs. Maybe that didn't fix everything. Maybe that's not the answer, but we tried something, right? And it's creating teachers and it's bringing people into the profession. I think if we can paint them a picture of a different reality, we have to. We absolutely have to, because people don't go into it anymore for 30 years in a TCRS paycheck. That's not the reality of what we're doing.
Hi, I'm Melissa Lindsay, Montgomery Central High School. I think this kind of plays off of what Chris just asked. Some teachers are leaving CMCSS and going to other districts because of the workload. Just this year I've lost friends, and in the next year we'll be going to Dixon, to Cheatham County, to Robertson County, and these are really good professional people that we would want to keep in our district. So the workload here is greater. And we've been told that the salary difference, compensates. When they leave this county, they are losing money when they leave the district. But my question is, we're losing good people. And so at what point is it still worth it to continue with additional meetings, book studies, and those types of things if we're losing good people, even though we have a higher salary?
Thank you for the question, Melissa. I appreciate it. I work every Friday with your colleagues in MEDA, and we talk about nothing but issues within the schools that they need my help solving with the chief of academic, as the chief of academics, rather. And we talk a lot about these questions that you're bringing up now, right? And we look at, and I am fortunate now to have served in different districts, because 3 years ago, I sat on committees with you, and I was probably pushing back a lot on increasing planning time and a variety of things that there really are some pretty simple fixes within schedule. At the time, it sounded like it was gonna cost the world, and it was not the way we did business, right? But I see now from having experience in different places where we can have an MOU with an hour of planning time devoted to our teachers that will help with those things. I've seen where we can stick to and have faculty meeting schedules. To answer your question, is a book study worth losing teachers to another county? Absolutely not. But I don't know that the book study is the problem. I think, I'll go back to redesigning the teaching profession. And again, if you heard parts of my interview, becoming obsessed with creating a culture where people want to work here. So my goal is that within 2 or 3 years, we're reversing that problem, that people are coming back to take the extra money that we're willing to pay them and the benefits that Montgomery County is known for, because we've redesigned the profession in a way that says, I want to be part of that, right? And I love the book study because the rest of my burdens that Tammy Mansky may have mentioned have been relieved as such, that I can actually focus on reading a book that will help me grow in a job-embedded way, right? Not in more PD in the summertime, not in staying after school for another course, but in a job-embedded way. To have an on-site mentor that does it, that creates another leadership opportunity for people in your building. So teachers are team teaching, they're seeing each other in classrooms. We're taking advantage of the teacher leaders right here in our building that are teaching kids. And maybe then we're not losing people to other counties, maybe they're coming back. But that would be my goal, would be to steal them all back and more. But we have to create something that's different than those other schools. And right now what's different is that it sounds like we're asking more of our teachers. We can't apologize for asking for what's right for kids. My CMCA folks know me well enough to know I won't apologize for demanding what's right for children. I never will, never have. But we do have to support our employees in doing it. And you heard me may have said in my interview as well, we can't put student achievement up here at the cost of employee well-being, because as my friends at MEDA like to remind me on a very regular basis, happy teachers make effective teachers, and that makes for high achieving students. And they're 100% right. Thank you for the question, I appreciate it.
Hi, Dr. Bellamy. My name is Daryl Crawford. I'm the school counselor at
Nice to meet you, Daryl.
I have a two-part question.
Sure.
How are you going to ensure that school counselors are going to be able to do and focus on their jobs, 80% direct and 20% indirect services, and take away non-counseling duties so that we can focus on our American School Counseling rubric?
Sure.
The second part of that question is, how are you going to ensure budgets for school counselors to attend trainings outside of the district with professional organizations and whatnot?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for your service. We appreciate what you do. So I'll draw on some of my experience in Metro, where I currently work is a student-based budgeting district, and budgets are done very differently, and that principals get a certain allocation. And so here in Montgomery County, we have a base staff, and a lot of that is handled by my wonderful colleagues back there in HR, right? We look at the BDP and we apportion out what's that, how many kids are in the building, and what's driven by those numbers, right? Our budget's driven by that. I currently work in a system where a principal gets an allocation, understands the non-negotiables, that the minimum staffing you have to have, and then they get to choose a variety of other things. And what I've seen is the majority of them, especially in these times, are choosing additional counselors, they're choosing additional social workers, and we're getting past the ratio of what's mandated and what is actually needed. And so it becomes very easy to hold those 80-20 ratios when you're staffed that way. But now, that takes a drastic redesign, right? When I say redesigning the teaching profession, we're having to redesign the budgeting and the staffing parts of that as well. And when I talk about the budget process and bringing stakeholders along and getting feedback, it takes ownership from the whole county, everybody to want it. It takes parents saying, my kid needs another counselor. It takes counselors saying, I can't get to every kid because of that. It takes every other teacher that's not a counselor saying, his services are so valuable, I need more of them. We've got to create a coalition of people that say that we need it. We got to put our money where our mouth is, and then we can do it. Beyond that, it becomes just scheduling, right? And is it held in place? I mean, honestly, if there's a state requirement that it's 80-20, then we need to be adhering to those requirements. And if for some reason it can't happen in the building, that's a conversation that needs to be held between a site-based team and their supervisors to make sure that it's happening, right? We need to have processes in place and procedures so that counselors can stress if those things aren't happening, work through your principal, work through your level director, follow those chains of command. But the fact is, if we say our kids need more social workers, more social emotional learning, our counselors, and they need a budget to travel, to professionally develop themselves, then we have to advocate for it in the budget process. We have to be clear with people what that number is going to cost us, and then we have to measure a return on investment. If we say it's worth doing, we have to know that we have to measure it. So how can we measure that not only was it worth doing, but it's making a difference for our kids? And that's where parent stakeholder feedback come back in, right? I have never seen a strong advocate as a parent who knows their child got the service they needed, right? That's a parent that will advocate, will continue to come back, and will continue to say thank you for the job you're doing. And when we create that cycle where everybody, the whole community sees it, we're all talking about it, we're measuring our rate of our return on investment, we're holding ourselves accountable, the sky's the limit. And I will go out there and I will champion that cause for anybody, and I will dare folks to push back because we will have painted a picture that says our kids need it, our kids deserve it, and it's time to fund it. I hope that answers your question. I appreciate you asking. Thank you for what you did.
Hello, Dr. Bellamy.
Hello.
I'm Constance Spring. I'm a success coach at Early Technical College. And my question, or my first question tonight is, in a recent collaborative conferencing survey, 67% of teachers said they have considered alternate employment this year. As director, what will you personally do to improve teacher morale?
Constance, thank you for the question, and you need no introduction. I appreciate your candidness in the question. I appreciate your work at TCAT and what you do as a student success coach. I think personally what I can do to improve morale is many of the things. Again, I hate to refer back to my interview constantly, but I think we have to be obsessed with it. We have to measure it constantly and can't be afraid of the feedback, right? Turning our blind eye to it doesn't change how people feel. And it hurts to get a survey that says that people don't love working with you right now or working for your organization. But it doesn't hurt as much as them leaving because they don't feel like you listen to them, right? And so I think we've got to be obsessed with it. It's something that Adrian Battle has really conditioned me to accept and love in a way that I didn't when I worked here. We did panorama staff surveys once a month. And it's a 3-question, all of you are like, I don't want another survey every month. Hear me say it's not that bad. It literally gets texted to your phone. It's 3 questions. You click on it, you answer it. You get to shout somebody out. You get to say what's on your mind, what's going on. But overall, they're asked, how do you feel about working where you work? Since we started that data, I've seen measured improvement. I'm not going to tell you in every school. I have 130 of them, right? But in the majority of my executive directors, the majority of each of their networks is showing improvement. You know why? Because it's right there in your face that this person, it hurts to read it. She's not liking working here right now. What can I do to fix that? And sometimes it's simple answers. It's going by, just being visible, shaking their hand, saying thank yous for the things I mentioned. So personally, that's the first thing I do is I would look at what we're gathering right now and I would ask, is it enough? Are we obsessed with creating a culture where our employees can thrive? You know, I don't teach students. I don't even work with principals any longer. I work with principal supervisors. And so we've got to be obsessed with those conditions. We've got to get data we can take action I'll use the same answers I use with this gentleman. If I'm gonna bring a request in the budget to use a POSIT survey or a panoramic survey to measure those things on a regular basis, I need to know it's gonna pay dividends. But then I'm asking principals I'm looking at in this room to look at one more survey, because they're under the gun too, right? They're already feeling the stress. And then again, when you click on that survey and you realize a chunk of a percentage of your employees aren't happy here, it hits you in a different way, right? And so I've got to support them too in understanding. It's not about saying you're not supportive or doing a bad job, any more than it's about saying that I'm responsible for everyone's happiness. It's about creating a culture that we're all responsible for. And then we're all part of a team and we all own that. So there's some direct things I would do. And then of course, I mean, you know, once you come in, you do some feedback sessions, you do some listening sessions, you hear other little things here and there. But first and foremost, I want to know what data we have. I want to know what's our obsession with it, because that's what we got to do to bring back employees, to attract the counselors we want, to attract new teachers to the profession, to take things off people's plates. Every one of these questions come down to create an environment where people are happy to come to work and want to work here. And until we actually know the baseline of that, I don't know that we can address it. One thing that concerns me is, again, that I mentioned in my interview, the most recent Tennessee Educator Survey, it's clear that Montgomery County is underperforming the state in a lot of metrics. I mean, that's not a place Montgomery County used to be. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, people are hurting. It seems like it's hurting Montgomery County maybe more than others, and so I'm anxious to help folks come out of it, and I'd be honored if I get a chance to do that. Thank you.
Hey again, Dr. Bellamy. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Young. I'm a school psychologist. I serve as Hazelwood Elementary School and Carmel Elementary School.
Stars are always shining.
So you spoke about having strong relationships, friendships with many people here who both live in and work for the CMCSS school district. You also talked about holding yourself up to a higher standard and placing them at that standard as well. Will such strong friendships, relationships impact your ability and decision in holding friends accountable for actions that may go against CMCSS policy? How will you separate relationship, friendships from business in order to do what's best for teachers, students, and parents in this district?
It's a great question. It just got real here. I appreciate the question. Honestly, I've given a great deal of thought to that. And so I'll be honest, when I left the district in 2020, I was in a very different place mentally. That's not something I share with a lot of people, because when the pandemic happened, there was a lot of feedback online and everywhere else about decisions we were making. And these were people that know me my whole life, people I went to school with, right, on Facebook, talking about you and things like that. It's a hard thing to deal with. And so when I moved to Metro, it was a relief. I didn't have that. I didn't have that as far as people that I'm like, you know me. Why wouldn't you just ask me that, right? Why are you blasting me on Facebook about it? And so making the decision to come back was not one I took lightly. But I've always been able to establish, one, there's a difference between a relationship and a friendship. I have a relationship with every single person in this room we've worked for the same organization, we've worked in a variety of capacities. And I don't think anybody that's ever worked with me or for me would tell you that I have trouble holding people accountable, and that it's ever affected a decision I've made. And I think there are multiple opportunities along the way to have seen that and to see the courageous decisions I've made, the choices I've made. And the fact is, I work here for children. I don't work here for friends or for relationships. We work here to do what's right for children. And we're going to do that first and foremost. But as a director, you have a chain of command as well. And I think anyone that knows me also knows what's off limits when you're coming directly to me. My staff at Hazelwood knows point blank when I left. You didn't come to me about a problem, you went to the new principal about a problem. I don't care that I was the director of services for exceptional students. When I took over as a high school director, I left the elementary world, every one of my principals knew, that's not an email I'm gonna answer, because you now have a different chain of command for that. And so I believe in structure and process, and I believe in that chain of command, and I will never do anything to one of my employees to keep them from being able to do the job, to make the right decision for children. And again, I'll hold myself above reproach for that. And sometimes that means, it means distancing some of those friendships and relationships you know. And so I do consider the strength that I have those connections to Clarksville. But I want to be clear, I said relationships, not friendship. Although certainly I have friendships in the Clarksville area, right, just like I do in the Nashville area currently, and I'm able to supervise them there. And so again, I hold myself above reproach when I do that. We're always going to make the decision that's right for students, but enforcing the chain of command, following the process, and make sure people are held accountable, including myself. And if we're not getting the results we need, I'll be the first one to say. That's a good question, thank you for that. Hello, Ms. Chancellor.
Hi, Dr. Bellamy, I missed you.
I miss you too. Congratulations on your retirement.
Well, thank you. I'm Deborah Chancellor, I'm a first grade MCL. What advice do you have for the students, the educational assistants, the teachers, and the administrators who tomorrow, not next year or next month, are going back to work in an environment where assaults are happening every day? Students assaulting students, students assaulting staff, students having meltdowns when teachers are trying to teach. And I need you to inspire us to go back tomorrow morning with that smile on our face, because I feel right now that very few people really know or even want to know what is happening down those hallways. Please just inspire us to go back tomorrow.
Ms. Chancellor, that might be the toughest question I've received all night, and I've received about 40 of them.
Work done.
I don't doubt that for a second, knowing that Chancellor, that I know. I know the expectation you hold your students to, and I know the expectation you hold yourself to, Ms. Chancellor. And so I'm gonna try my best to give you an inspiring message, but I don't know that I'll meet that mark. And so you talked about, we've got staff and students that are going back tomorrow, right? And I have thousands going back to work tomorrow in Metro Nashville. And what I tell them right now is, right, that I can't do anything tomorrow to solve that student's trauma and that problem, but we know it exists from trauma, from what they're experiencing outside of school, from the lived experiences they've had. And we know that they don't have the supports they need, right? And so what I will tell you is if I'm selected for this job, it won't take effect tomorrow, but the things I promised in my interview, I don't say them out there publicly and think I won't be held accountable to them. I was very intentional about the plans I laid out and the things that I said, and it's because my heart is in this profession. And when you talk about teachers hurting and needing help, and principals hurting and needing help, because I promise you they know what's going on in those hallways and those rooms, it hurts their heart too. I'm in classrooms and schools every single Monday and Wednesday. I see it, I know the need, it hurts my heart too. And so the things that I will do long-term are the things that I mentioned in that interview, right? We've got to reimagine what we're doing, we've got to redesign, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, we've got to have a transparent budget cycle. We can't have one article that says there's no discipline problem and another that says it's huge and we need to align money and recondition things here, right? We've got to be transparent about what is happening and what our needs are. Then we've got to be real about the fact that different kids have different needs, right? And that's why I'll continue to be and espouse a formula and a funding that follows a student. Students have different needs. I've seen a powerful example of that in my last 2 years. I gave an example about guidance counselors because there are principals, I'm sorry, forgive me, school counselors, you're 100% right. Thank you for correcting me on that, for school counselors. Somewhere, Ashley Dale is watching this, it's like, I told that guy for 3 years. Thank you, I appreciate that. But I've watched the power when a principal can use their site-based leadership team and choose what they need. And so the relief isn't gonna be instant, Ms. Chancellor. I can't give you something that will go through and fix that tomorrow. I can give you all the things that I said I wanna work on for you, and I'll give the employees I currently work with my guarantee that those are things we're already working on and will continue. And we'll continue to get through this budget cycle and support them with that. As far as inspiration for tomorrow, I'm gonna encourage you to look no further than you have for your entire career. You got at least 20 little faces coming to greet you tomorrow morning. And I know you, I know your heart, I know that's all the inspiration you need. Because I know the teacher you are, the job you've done for a very long time. And so that's what I would beg every teacher and principal to do right now, is look at those little faces. Dr. Bible looks at her cabinet every day and she says, no one else is coming. This work is on us, right? And so I look at my team every Friday when I meet with them and say the same thing, no one else is coming. We're the ones that were given this responsibility, we were the ones that were given this charge. And for right now, unfortunately, that's gotta be enough for you, Ms. Chancellor, and I hope that's inspiring enough. But I know you, and I know the job you'll do, and I hope the teachers that are out there listening tonight understand that I'm not just doing lip service to these things. That, again, when I say I wanna change the profession, when I say I wanna attract teachers back, it's the heart of what you're saying, Ms. Chancellor, right? Yes, the extra duties hurt. Yes, the extra book studies don't feel great sometimes, but the heart of what a lot of our teachers saying is right there. Right, and making sure that we have the supports our kids need. Thank you, Ms. Chancellor, I appreciate your question.
Chris Renaud, Central Office.
Hey, Chris.
I'm really curious how you characterize your leadership style, and then to elaborate on that a little more, I'd really like to know what your strategy and plan is on how you're gonna create and inspire followership.
Sorry, what was the last part?
How you're gonna create or inspire followers.
Okay, Chris, can you come introduce yourself?
I'm Chief Financial Officer.
Nice to meet you, Chris. I don't think we ever had a chance to work together. I hope real soon that you get to know me really well. And so, you asked what I consider my leadership style. It's certainly evolved over the years. 12, 15 years ago, I would characterize it as probably young and arrogant. And I hope that the people that worked with me then see a very different side of me now. And I characterize it by, again, I structure my schedule by listening. I have to realize that, again, I don't teach students any longer, and I don't work with principals any longer. Just like you don't manage the books at the school, and Norm doesn't drive a bus, right? So you have to, all hands on deck, right? So that's what, hopefully that's what my leadership style is. But I think it's evolved over the years to really be what it needs to be in the moment. I think a leader has got to be, I want to lead from the center. I would never ask my folks to do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. And so I don't want to pigeonhole myself and characterize it by one word or the other, but it's centralized on feedback. And it's centralized on listening to my team and making sure they're listening to their teams. Because the teachers in this room, the principals in this room, the employees in this room, the ones doing the work know what they need. So if you heard that in my interview, told a story about Cancer McQueen saying what we need to do each day, what supports do you need? And thank you. And so that's really what I characterize it by, is vision oriented. This is a mission objective, what we have to accomplish. And then listening, what do you need for me to get things out of your way? What barriers are in your way that you need me to remove for you? And do it in a cyclical way. And then finally, thank you for a job well done. Even if we didn't get exactly where we wanted, we got somewhere, and I appreciate that. And so I think when you live that, you inspire people to follow you by the person they know you be, by knowing where your heart is and what you want to do for students. And so, I appreciate the question. I hope that was a meaningful enough answer for you. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Carlisle. I'm Montgomery Central Middle STEM teacher.
Montgomery Central,
Yes.
representing the bar tonight.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
I know that CMCSS leaders meet with legislators, and we still face career-altering legislation, like the CRT and charter school legislation from our own representatives. We're being threatened with banning books. What is your personal role as director of schools to defend our educators and our patrons?
Montgomery Central coming in hard with the questions tonight. I think it's important to determine political responsibilities and professional responsibilities, right? And so what I'll say my responsibility is the advocacy of the children in this district, the teachers in this district, the students in this district. And so when I'm meeting with legislators or anyone looking to cast a vote, I have to understand they're looking at things from a political perspective, right? Sometimes they're able to be swayed, sometimes they're not. My job is, again, to champion our staff, and then once a law is passed, defend our staff and make sure that that our staff feels comfortable. And so I'll use some of the recent legislation as far as handling sensitive topics, right? Back in August, when the last legislative session was closed, there were several bills passed that frankly had many of our social studies teachers worried. Many of our high school secondary literacy teachers worried. And our goal immediately became to pull everybody in, to talk through our scope and sequence, to talk through the law and what it meant, and to be able to say, if you're within these parameters, I've got your back. I'm gonna defend you to the ends of the earth. But we have to understand what we have the ability to enforce and not. Once a law is passed, unless it's being challenged, unless it's been suspended, right? We don't get the opportunity to hold ourselves above that law. And so my job becomes supporting our faculties and our staffs and implementation of it in a way that support, that again, our teachers can do their job without fear of retribution. As far as advocacy on the front end, I think we have to be clear, and I have to be very careful about not straying into a political argument about my own personal opinion, whether it's about charters or books that folks don't want our kids to read, or any number of things, right? It's not my job to legislate, it's my job to say what I think is harmful to children and what's good for children. And so I have to advocate in those ways, and that can admittedly be a very tough tightrope to walk. But I also have to just make my peace with the reality that people are going to pass legislation, and I have to make sure we can do our job and our teachers feel protected. And so I want to focus on that end. Advocacy on the front end, of course, is going to be driven by listening to our teachers. What's the potential of this law for our children, for our teachers? What are the outcomes of that? And all I can do is be honest with the legislators about what they're about to vote on and the potential consequences it has, right? But every legislative season is difficult. That's nothing new in education. I mean, I think they've passed, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Joyner used to write a brief for us every year about 70 new laws that got passed, right? And then we have to look and make sure we're in compliance with it, whether it's the Tom Joyner Physical Education Act, whether it's the RTI manual that was passed years and years ago. There's no shortage of laws that are passed every year. Some are in direct contrast to one another, right? And on the one hand, we have to spend time here, but we can't take it from here. Navigating those waters for our teachers is difficult, and I know that adds some anxiety to their plate. So on the advocacy front, I can be honest with legislators about what the potential consequences of these decisions are. On the back end, my team and I will make sure we support our teachers to make sure that they're above reproach and that we've got their back.
Hello, my name is Melissa Johnson. I'm the RTI coach for secondary schools of the district and also the academic coach at Clarksville High School. And I would just like to know that as students continue to need accelerated learning due to years plus of disrupted instruction, what specific steps do you think should be the top 3 priorities as director? And please, within one of those, address high school students specifically, as we're trying to recover 2 to 3 years of social promotions out of middle school.
Well, thank you for your question. I want to make sure I hit it specifically. So I think you asked for 3 steps to recover learning loss, right? So first, I've used the word obsessed with data, right? So I think we have to be obsessed with every student individually. We have to, you heard me earlier say every child, every day, and what that means is knowing every single child's needs and giving every child what they need, not every child the same thing, right? And so I think we have robust systems that do that in a skills-based and standards-based way. And we have to communicate with the public that this recovery is not going to be in one academic year. The pandemic hasn't lasted one. How are you going to recover from something that was 2 years long within the 2 years? So it's going to take time. And so I think, one, I'm obsessed about the data and making sure that every student is being equipped and caught up in the way. We won't know the effects of this full pandemic for a long time, for a very long time. And so we've got to be honest about that. We've got to continue to be obsessed with data and make sure that every child's growing so that they can make those decisions for themselves. We have to be transparent with the public, or number 2, about how long it's going to take. We can't just celebrate our successes and growth without saying where we still need to be. And then you said specifically about high schools. Specifically for high schools, I want to go back to something I've referenced in my interview, a student-based budget model where we have to realize I can talk about programs, I can talk about reset programs, credit recovery, I can talk about ingenuity, I can talk about a million other things that we've used to help recover credits. But what I heard you ask is how we're going to help students recover from social losses of the last 2 or 3 years and perhaps being promoted when they weren't ready, right? And I think our principals and our teachers and our staffs in high schools know more about that than I can pretend to know. You spend your entire day, every day doing that. So I would love to ask teachers in our high school, what do you think our students are in need of there, right? And then I would love to fund it in a way where schools can choose what their student body needs. Because again, getting district feedback and saying this particular program is going to work across an entire district of this size, I just don't believe that's going to work anymore. I think that worked once upon a time. Maybe when we had 20,000 students in 25 schools. But when you're getting to this size, 37, 38,000 students at any schools like we are, I don't know that one-size-fits-all approach works anymore. Thank you for the question.
Hello, Dr. Bellamy. Cynthia Brown, New Providence Middle School, ESL. I'm curious to know what sacrifices can be made at the district level to make sure we have certified teachers in the classrooms.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate what you did. I still remember watching some of your math lessons at Kenwood Middle School. So I know the math department, or Kenwood Elementary, I'm sorry. I know the math folks hate to lose you. I'll be honest, I don't want to speak in hypotheticals about something I'm not currently educated to answer. So when you ask what sacrifices central office can make, it would be at best ignorant of me to say what I think those sacrifices could be right now, Ms. Brown. I think it's always a popular thing to say trim central office. I hear it in Metro, I heard it when I was here. I think every director, every central office hears it. And I'm not saying there aren't costs that can be cut here and decisions that can be made at every school level. So when you get into student-based budgeting, there are schools that choose to use their funds in ways I wouldn't, right? And so what I can promise you is the return on investment work that I discussed earlier, right? So we have got to look at the needs. When I talk about convening stakeholders, creating strategic work, creating a budget that works for everybody, we gotta bring everybody to the table and talk about it. And when I say we're gonna create an aspirational budget, data driven, this is what we know our kids need, this is what our teachers say they need to get there, our principals say we need to get there, what operations say we need to get there. And then we've got to talk about a return on investment of what's currently working. And so I can promise you a process that'll be transparent and open for everybody to do that, but I can't promise you right now what that would be. And I hope you can appreciate that. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Bellamy.
Good evening.
Denise Smith Martinez at Kenwood Middle School as English teacher. The Tennessee Department of Education compiled data, which includes that only 13% of educators in Tennessee are educators of color, and only 20% of our administrators are of color. Now, we know of the Grow Your Own program, but how do you envision CMCSS retaining quality and qualified educators and administrators of color? And how should CMCSS connect and act on this inequity across this domain?
Thank you for the question. I think it's an incredibly important question. Certainly proud of the work that's happening in Grow Your Own and the efforts it's leading there and some successes it's having in increasing those numbers. Obviously, I can't pretend to know what it's like to enter this profession as a person of color. I can talk about my experiences and how I've been fortunate the last couple of years to work with a staff that's incredibly diverse and brings such a different perspective to things than I've ever been exposed to in the past. What I can tell you about that experience is my leadership team and the people that I surround myself with coming back to this district or any other one will absolutely represent our students in a very diverse way, and we'll have diverse voices around the table. And I've seen firsthand for the last 2 years how much better your decisions can be when you include that approach and that aspect. As far as retaining them, I would want to hear from our teachers what will help them. Teachers of color will help retain them once we've attracted them. We have some strong partnerships with TECA, with a few other folks across the state. There are thought partners and research associates out there that have done some great work with this. I can't look you in the eye and tell you I have the answers or a lived experience, is that right? But I would love to know what our employees would tell me about that. I know what some of the research says about creating safe spaces and creating opportunities and protected opportunities, right, within the day. And I would love to see us concentrate specifically on that and focus on that. But Denise, I can't lie to you and tell you I have every answer, right? And I certainly don't have that lived experience. What I can tell you is I would draw on partnerships. I would draw on the people that I've been blessed to work with both here and currently in Metro Nashville, and ask them about their experiences and what drew them to that and what kept them there and what made them feel the way they wanted. You know, go back to Constance's question about being obsessed with our culture. And part of that is not just the culture of an overall school, but the culture of the exact groups you're talking about, and how we're protecting everyone and making sure everyone's voice is heard, because our students need to learn from teachers. They need to see themselves in those teachers. And so it's not lost on me that as a male, I'm applying for a job that lead a profession dominated by females. That never has been lost on me. When I was the elementary director, that was something I took very seriously. The fact that I got to lead 24 incredibly hardworking, energetic, and amazing female leaders. And I was very proud to do that. And all I could do is rely on their expertise and put them in places and make sure I listened to them and make sure I heard them as best I could. And to that every opportunity I could, raise their voice, elevate their voice, and make sure I was listening. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello, Dr. Bellamy.
Hello.
Have missed you.
So I have a two-part question, because you know I love our babies in Montgomery County. So the first part is, do you support pre-K? And then the second follow-up question is, what is your plan going to be to implement universal pre-K here in Montgomery County? And what are you gonna do about the capacity at our buildings to hold those programs?
That was a three-parter.
There was an and in there, so.
Okay, I got you. Well, I hope I support pre-K if I'm gonna answer your second question about making it universal. And so Emily Vaughn, hold on to your seat, get ready for this one, right?
I'm ready, I'm sitting down first.
I have been absolutely blessed to work the last 2 years of my life for a director in a district that buys birth to 5, buys 3 to 5 education, and invests in it top to bottom. In our early learning centers, in the 60, 70 plus elementary schools, and I've seen the power, and I don't care what a Vanderbilt research study says. And I was the one quoted, just for you, Emily Vaughn. I was the one quoting it as the elementary director years ago, saying the study is telling us that the diminishing return was right. And far be it for me to tell the folks at Vanderbilt they're wrong, but they're wrong. Because there's no way to measure where those children would have been without it, even if the results diminished. So first, let me tell you, I absolutely support pre-K and an aggressive expansion of pre-K. Now let's talk about the reality of the situation is that it's not funded the way it needs to be at the state level. So we'll go back to our conversation, our question about advocacy, right? Because if we believe in it, and we think we demand it for our kids, then either the state's gonna fund it, or if they're not, we've gotta build it into our budget cycle that you've heard me talk about in a way that says the community wants to invest in it. And so my plan to go after that would be my exact same plan to increase school counselors, or any of the other questions that I've gotten tonight, is that we've gotta put it out there, it's gotta be the community's decision. It can't be Mason Bellamy saying, I need this much money for this many pre-K programs, because that's a big ask. The community has to believe it, the community has to buy in it, and passionate educators like all of you back there have to say it's what we need. People have to show up, they have to advocate for it, they have to ask for it, because somewhere if we fund that, there's something else we're not funding, right? I talked about an aspirational budget, what we're gonna choose from. That obviously creates another problem for us, a growing district that already doesn't have enough space, right? And so I'm not gonna lie to you, the realities of these problems coming together might mean that it's not doable short term the way that you want to see it done. There are still aggressive partnerships we can have in other spaces, right? My team right now is working on a plan for Dr. Battle for a birth to 3 expansion. Got a list of every hospital. We're tracking down contacts so that the moment a mother gives birth, one of the first people she hears from is Metro Nashville Public School System. And I want Clarksville to do the same thing, so that she knows this is how you can read your child. These are resources you can have. We want you to choose us from the day a child's born, right? Now in a district with charter schools and school choice, it means something different for us. We have to show you we're worth choosing. But Montgomery County's getting there too. We're a growing district and parents have options, and we've got to show them we're worth choosing. We should be there from the moment that mother needs us up to the moment they drop their precious darling angel off on our doorstep when they are 5 years old. And so, I hope that answers your question, but yes, I support pre-K, and that's what I do to try to expand it to the best we can.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
How do we solve the issue of groups of students who may be over or underrepresented in advanced course enrollment or gifted and talented programs?
It's a great question. I absolutely love that question. So advanced academics falls under my current purview right now, and I'm again blessed in Nashville to work in a district that has a lot of community advocacy. And I have been asked that question multiple times by several groups since the day I got to Metro Nashville. And so I'll go back to an obsession with data, an obsession with culture. And so I'd ask right now, what are our numbers? Do we know? What are our numbers in those classes? To what degree are students of color being given the opportunity to succeed and take advanced placement courses and advanced academic courses? All the way back to elementary school. To what degree are those students represented in gifted classes, gifted and talented education? I can tell you what the numbers are in the district I serve now because we are obsessed with it. We've been on a path for increasing it since 2015. There are a number of ways you do it. You look at systemic inequities that basically are built to keep students of color out of those courses, and you break down those barriers. You change the way you identify kids, you change the way you fund it, and you give kids opportunity, and then you watch them succeed. You support them through it, right? And so it's not just access to, but it's success in. And so that's the first question I ask if I'm hired is what are our numbers? That's something we need. If we're talking about every child being college and career ready, every child choosing for themselves what they need, the first chance a child gets to hear the word advanced coursework or AP should not be when they're a sophomore in high school. We should be talking about that in their transition plan when they're in elementary school, when they're in middle school. We should know what their characteristics of gifts are. We should know what their innate abilities are, and we should advocate for those things. But until we know the number, and until we make it a priority, and we report out on it systemically as a KPI, you're not going to improve it. We're going to continue to exist in a system that has failed children like that. Appreciate the question.
Okay, Montgomery Central again. So in your earlier response, you talked about Norm, and Norm has driven a bus, and our CFO actually subbed, he subbed this year. And I think that changes perspectives, because when we step outside of our comfort zone, we step outside of our primary role, we really learn, and it seems like all jobs are easier until we have to do them. So my question is, I think that a lot of educators feel that there is a growing disconnect between people in the classroom and people who are at, the level director position or the central office position, even if they've been in the classroom, because, we don't feel safe anymore in our hallways. Things have changed tremendously in just a few years, yet we are being led sometimes by people who aren't experiencing that. So how do you solve that disconnect? Because I think that we all believe that our leaders want to, but that's, as my principal says, hope is not a strategy.
Shout out to Christy Nelson. And BJ Worthington used to say that as well, hope is not a strategy. Kudos for you, Norm. I didn't know you had your CDL. Congratulations. I think servant leadership in that magnitude is paramount. Since the pandemic began, we have had a rotating group of support our staff, and the expectation is that we're in schools. Last year, it was 1 day a week. This year, it has been once or twice a month. Now, obviously, every time you roll out an initiative like that, there's a job going undone, right? To ask someone in the finance department to be in the school 2 days a month, that's 20% of each of those weeks when they go out. Payroll's not getting done, right? And I think we all want to be, so we have to be aware of that, right? There's a strain on the system in another way. And so I think there are ways that certain jobs can support our schools to be seen like you're talking about in other ways, but it's not always going to be looking like being sub or driving the bus. But I do think we have to make it a priority to be in schools. And I talked about my own schedule and what I would demand, and it would be built upon just that. I do think, especially when you're in a time where there may be a sub shortage, where there may be struggles that way, spending time in concerted ways, not as a photo op or anything, but to really hear what's going on. I think that's the heart of what you're getting at, right? Experiencing and hearing what's going on. And we need to build time for that. Certainly different positions, like I said, can build it in different ways. And that's definitely a priority. I rode a bus last week, as a matter of fact, an EE route to understand the strain they were under. I got on a bus at 1:30 and got off at 5:30, and I watched every route that gentleman went to. The schools were a little upset with him because he was late, but it wasn't his fault. And he would tell me, he said, Dr. Bellamy, they're going to be upset with me. You see, I was doing and he was doing everything he could to get there, right? And me seeing that personally. Me getting off the bus and having someone tapping their foot and glaring at me like that hit it, right? I knew what position I was putting him in every single day. Even though I'm not the chief of operations, right? It was good for me to see that and to be there. I hope it made a difference for him too. And so I love to hear that those things are going on, and I'll tell you that we've got to be obsessed, I'll say it again for my friend Constance up here, with what's happening for our teachers, the culture and climate we're building, because those are all indicators of what you're talking about. And so I'd love to tell you I had a quick fix of just, hey, we're all gonna go out and sub one day a month, right? I'm interested in solving your problem, not looking like I care. Like, I don't wanna look like I'm solving your problem, I want to solve your problem. And so I'm not gonna be big on bells and whistles that look like we're doing, I want to know that we're solving it. And if that is an initiative like that, then let's do it, sign me up. Or if that initiative is what gives us the information we need to solve your problem, then sign me up. But I'm interested in fixing it. Thank you.
Another question back here, and then Chris, and then we have about 5 minutes, these might be the last two, just depending on how long they take.
Cynthia Brown again, New Providence Middle School. I have two little things. I would just like to please have my classroom always feel like the director's office with air conditioning and heat. And I would also like when people come to visit the schools that maybe it really be a surprise and not in students.
Okay. Well, Ms. Brown, if I'm the director, I can just turn off the AC in my office, we can fix that one. I certainly, you know what, I mean, working conditions matter. And I mentioned I meet with NDA every single Friday. Sometimes what we talk about is that the heat's not working, I'm not gonna lie. And that's why I give them that FaceTime every single week, because they've been conditioned for so long to wait until our monthly meeting, and it hit me with 47 problems. And Constance Brown will tell you, I've said for years, you have my number. Don't wait. Don't swelter in the heat for months at a time. You have my number, call me. That's why we set the meeting that way. And so, I mean, there's always gonna be operational issues, and so I hope we can get that fixed for you. As far as school visits and things, I do have to be aware of the strain and stress that puts a staff under for a director of schools or high-level officials to just show up. It's meant to be supportive, it's meant to get feedback. And so the way to which we do surprise visits is, I've gotta be honest with you, I don't know that that's a best practice. Although I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, and I hear what I think there are different ways to go about capturing the data you're talking about. But I think, in all transparency, understanding the strain and the anxiety that a director's visit can put on staff and things like that, we wanna make sure we follow best practice to do that. So the last thing I wanna be is a distraction. What I'm there for is to hear and help. And if that means getting you a portable fan, I'm happy to help. I figured you did.
All right, one last one.
All right, from Montgomery Central.
Coming in strong again. All right, so teachers are often told that teaching is a calling and made to feel selfish and ungrateful when requesting a living wage. Clarksville is on many lists as one of the fastest growing communities and counties in the country. And in Clarksville, house prices have risen over 20% in the last 2 years. So as director, how will you bridge the gap between teaching being a calling and teachers being paid their worth as professionals?
It's again, hard-hitting question from Montgomery Central, as I expected and listening. I mean, teaching is definitely a calling, right? And I think both things can be true. It can be a calling, and we can respect you as the educated professional you are and pay you what you're worth. But I think I'll go back to the budget cycle, the pre-K question, the school counselor question. At some point, there's a series of choices we have to make. I'm not gonna look you in the eye and tell you it's a decision I get to make as your director. I can tell you what I'll advocate for. I'll certainly weigh in and tell you what I think we should spend the money on. But at the end of the day, my job is to get advocacy and to get a budget that represents the needs of the district, right, and not the opinions of Mason Bellamy. And so, on the one hand, when we're discussing climate, school culture, the job, to say teaching is a calling, use that as an excuse of saying I can put more work on you because teaching is a calling is not something you're gonna hear from me. And if it is, I want you to call me on it, because I'm saying it right here publicly. Teaching is a calling, and sometimes you go above and beyond, and we know our teachers do. I've been that teacher, I've supported that teacher. I heard from Deb Chancellor a little bit ago, I know she's that teacher, I see lots of them, teachers and principals in the audience that do that. I'm also not going to lie to you and tell you I can guarantee that you'll get this percentage raise every year. I can tell you that my goal will be to make sure that our wages keep up the way they need to, and that our teachers feel valued and respected. And I'll go back to the question that your colleague asked me. My goal is to make sure teachers want to come here. And compensation is part of that. right? It doesn't make up everything. You'll leave, you can be well compensated and leave because you don't like what you're doing. But it's certainly a factor in that. And we've got to attend to that, and we've got to know if teachers are leaving to go to districts that pay less because of things, we can fix those things. And then if we compensate them more too, imagine the teachers we can bring back. I'll go back to talking about redesigning, reimagining the teaching profession. It shouldn't look the same in 3 years as it does now. If it does, we'll have missed our mark. But that's a lot of innovative work and a lot of hard work. It's gonna take the buy-in of the whole community. And so I think that's what I hope to be able to bring in everything I present tonight, is how I'll go about garnering support for that. And making sure we honor and value our teachers. And while we're at it, not just teachers, we have lots of classified staff that need a living wage. And that's not to say that they're not getting one. I'm not intimately familiar with our current pay grade here. But we have classified staff that need to be considered. We have drivers that need to be considered, right? We have bookkeepers, we have custodians, we have lots of people that need to be considered. And so it'll all be part of a fair compensation package and studying what we advocate for in our budget. And let the community needs rise up and let us advocate for it. And I'll present a budget to the board that they'll be proud of, and I hope advocates and represents what you like.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bellamy. I know you spent about 3 hours answering, I've lost count, maybe 100 questions with us. Is there anything that you want to end with sharing before we wrap up?
I'll end kind of the same way I started. It is an honor of a lifetime to get to speak to you. I'm absolutely humbled that I'm one of 4 finalists. I hope and I pray that it works out and I'm able to serve, and that you heard something tonight that inspires you. Ms. Chancellor, go teach again tomorrow and change lives for those kids. But the last thing I'd say to anyone watching Montgomery County or my folks that work for me currently, what you do matters and you are appreciated. I know parents don't always say it. I know I don't always say it. Your district leaders don't always say it. Your principal might not always say it. The kids might not always say it too. But what you do matters. It is a calling. And I appreciate it. It's been, the honor of a lifetime to get to talk to you tonight and get to answer your questions. The fact that you came out on Tuesday or Wednesday night means the world to me. And I'll never be able to repay or show my gratitude for that. So please, one more time from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your smiling faces. Appreciate your tough questions. And I'm just blessed. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's some kind of Star Wars
night too.
And then tomorrow we'll be back again. I think that's Cinco de Mayo and Friday is Friday. We will be here the next